I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. I'm Fern Ngai, and I'm CEO of Community Business. I'm very honored and delighted to be joined by Ashu Suyash, Managing Director and CEO of CRISIL, a global analytics company and India's foremost provider of ratings, data, research analytics, and solutions. CRISIL is majority owned by S&P Global, a leading provider of transparent and independent ratings, benchmarks, analytics, and data to the capital and commodity markets worldwide. Ashu has almost 30 years of experience in the financial services industry and has consistently been featured amongst the top 50 women in business in India for the past 10 years. Recently, she was on the Fortune India list of the top 50 powerful women in business, and she's been named one of the 25 most influential women in the asset management industry in Asia. In this 30-minute interview, as I invite Ashu to share some of her experiences and insights, we will be exploring a number of themes relating to women in leadership in India, seeking to answer the fundamental question: what more can be done to increase the number of women in leadership in India? So Ashu, you are a female CEO in a traditionally male-dominated industry. You received numerous prestigious accolades and are widely acclaimed as a highly accomplished leader. I'm sure our viewers will be very interested in your personal story and how you got to where you are today. So let's first talk about the role and influence of family in career choice and progression. How significant a role do Indian parents play in the career choices of their daughters? And to what extent are their views and expectations a barrier to the choices available to women? And do you see this changing?
Thank you very much for having me at this session. I'm delighted to be here and honored as well. I believe that parents have a significant role in shaping the thinking, the determination and future of little girls, daughters, who eventually either grow to be very successful or not. I say that because when you come into this world, you see your parents first, and they are the ones that put the first thoughts and teachings into your mind. I was very fortunate to be born into a family that was very simple, but believed in high thinking. I belong to a middle class home, and I'm blessed to be able to have born there, because you kind of are grounded and well-rounded pretty much from the time you come into this world. My parents invested in high quality education and spent the time in instilling strong values. And we are a spiritual family, and that helps a lot because it keeps you rooted, it keeps you in touch with the real world. And most importantly, my parents were thrilled to have a daughter, in fact, thrilled to have two daughters, and felt that their daughters needed to become somebody that the world could look up to, and hence grew their daughters in that way, groomed them in that way. And from a very early age, both of them would tell us that make up your mind, get down to working hard for it, go after it, and you will surely make it. They would say the world is yours, just choose to make it yours. And I think that went a long way in shaping my thinking and in helping me believe in myself. And if I look at it, and if somebody were to ask me what was that one big influence, it would just be this strong belief that they had in me, and as a result, I had in myself. The second thing, coming from a home where we were just two sisters, there was really no gender bias or discrimination. We competed against each other, and for us, it was about women doing well. There was no concept that the men did better than the women. In contrast, if you think of a large part of India where because of some of the liabilities that the society perceives a girl to be, especially when you think about rural India, uh, parents don't give their girls uh, high quality education. They don't give them that room to find themselves and give them that conviction, that confidence that they can go out and claim the world. And that's changing a lot. And the two biggest contributors on why this is changing is literacy and education. If I look at India 6 decades ago, way before my time, education wasn't a big focus. That sort of began to change people. They came away from old dogmas and policies which were very supportive of the girl child. And both of which have led to a time where there is, I think, good opportunity. I would say it's not yet an equal opportunity sort of society or workplace environment, but much better from, let's say, the time when I started, when the number of girls in a class would be probably 15-20%. Today you have half of them, and you have at least 15-20 at least joining the workforce.
Thank you. So let's look at your career path and how intentional it was. I know from my own experience, I never really had the goal of becoming the CEO of a leading not-for-profit like community business. Life just happened, opportunities presented themselves. I was open to them and willing to come out of my comfort zone, but sometimes with a lot of apprehension. But things did come together, especially with the encouragement and support of others. So how has it been for you? Did you have early aspirations and ambitions? If so, how did you set yourself up for success? And if you didn't have an intentional plan, what do you think has enabled you to be successful, especially in your willingness to take a risk and work outside your comfort zone?
I would be lying if I said that I have charted out my whole career. But what I will say that I was clear I wanted a career and I wanted to make a difference. And right through, those were my guiding principles. So if you start with, I want to work, then you work. And if your guiding principle is, I want to make a difference, then you work really hard and you put in your best. And at the workplace, in your initial years, how do you know you're making a difference? You only know it when you get mentioned, you get rewarded, you get recognized. And for that, apart from effort, you have to stay abreast of what's happening in the organization. And you need to be able to step up and take responsibility. And these two guiding principles, I would say, not only framed my early choices, but the latter ones as well. And I must say, I joined banking by accident. I'm a chartered accountant from an academic point of view and from a degree point of view. And the plan was about either joining a chartered accountancy firm or setting up practice. In fact, I must say that setting up practice was something that I would have liked to do probably 15-20 years ago. And at that time, maybe that was my long-term plan. But when an opportunity to work with Citibank came about, the thing that struck me is a bank deals with a lot of customers, way more than what a chartered accountancy firm does. And a bank is in touch with the lives of people on a daily basis. And that was a very simple thought that got me to choose banking over joining a chartered accountancy firm. In fact, I must say that people were quite surprised because banks in those days did not hire too many women. And then joining a global bank, I think certainly set the stage, because at a global bank, you encountered the best of talent, and even the work ethic, I would say, was much better and more fair than what one would have encountered if one would have joined another organization. Uh, that was really, I would say, what went a long way. The fact that I put up my hand to take up assignments completely unlinked from what I would have done in the past helped really move the career along. And a good example was I spent my initial years in customer service roles, in heading operations. And very rarely do you see somebody move from operations to taking a more customer facing or a business head role. And I put up my hand for that. And the simple driving thing was, if one had to really contribute in a more meaningful way to clients and the organization, you had to be in a more front-facing role. And also, if you had to stand up to be counted for, you needed, something larger or a larger canvas to paint on. Well, I put up my hand, but I must say that my boss or manager took the big risk, because I was moving disciplines completely. And I have immense gratitude for him, and we're in touch even today, and he smiles every time I put in a call to him, because that risk that he took on me then, I think, paved the way for me to get my first CEO role as head of Fidelity, 16 years after my time at Citibank. And even at Citibank, every 18 months, I did a different role. What that did was, it gave me a good worldview of finance. It gave me a lot of skills. It allowed me to learn a lot of things which, no degree really equips you with. And brought me in touch with people all over the world, customers all over the world, and gave me that ability to think out of the box, to move away from the here and now. And what today I would say is strategic thinking, I think for me at that time, it was about thinking about the future. Today I can talk in management terms. I don't think at that time any of it really resonated with me. And with that, I got my first experience to become CEO, and that was, I think, over 14 years ago. And the learning from that was, don't get comfortable with what you do, because when you get comfortable, you start taking things for granted, you stop learning, you stop investing in your own capabilities. And the second was, don't wait for opportunity to knock at your door, because you might just keep waiting. At least make that attempt to seek them. And the third, when somebody takes a risk on you, work doubly hard, because that's the only way you can do justice to that risk. And I would say Fidelity took that risk on me in terms of giving me the CEO role, as did the CRISIL board in terms of giving me the role at CRISIL, because CRISIL is in a vastly different industry from banking and asset management. So wasn't intentional, but the driver was about making a difference. And in my current role, where CRISIL's mission is about making markets function better, I feel really privileged to be able to lead this organization and further its mission and vision.
Great, thanks. A lot of good advice there. Let's move on to another topic, and perhaps some of the challenges of being a woman, often a lone woman, in a male-dominated environment. So as mentioned, you built your career and risen through the ranks in what is typically a male-dominated environment in research and in banking. So how tough has this been for you, working in a male-dominated environment? And what are some of the strategies that you've had to develop to be successful in this kind of environment?
So I must say that the thought that it is male dominated and tough is an afterthought. While going through the many challenges that any woman would face, I looked at them as part of life. I didn't even look at them as challenges. Whether it was having my first baby, pretty much in year one of my job, and looking after my baby and the home and the work, and fairly long hours. I mean, it was almost a given that one would work for 14, 15 hours. It never occurred to me that this was upsetting work-life balance. A lot of people talk about work-life balance. To me, it was about I have to do my best at work and receive the recognition, and I must do even better at home because my family is really allowing me this great and wonderful opportunity. So, I would go back home and double up in terms of ensuring we had good, tasty food on the table. My daughter spent quality time. But I'll tell you, the one thing that made a difference was a very, very supportive husband. Not once would he ask me, why are you late? Or why is it that you have to travel? And not once did he frown upon my leaning on my parents or my in-laws in stepping in to look after my children. It all seemed the thing to do. And it is a huge lesson in just being human, right? A lot of us who have big roles often think that it's not a good thing to ask for help. For me, asking help was the norm. I would count on even a neighbor, if I was going to be home late, to pick up my daughter, or an aunt or a niece if she had to be picked up, or if no family was around, just a friend. And I, in turn, would extend my help when they needed it. Because it is those human bonds that go a long way. What today people call men as allies, my husband was my buddy, friend, mentor right through. And I would say the single biggest contributor after my parents, particularly my mother, in terms of where I got here. And that really helped me build a very supportive environment at work, because I realized that there are times when you have to lean on somebody at work because you have something, an emergency to deal with at home, or let's say something to be, you need a reminder, let's say if you're in the middle of a meeting. My colleagues, my own office, have been extended family for me. When there were health issues being faced by a closed one, I would leave word with either my secretary or a colleague saying, look, if there's a call, regardless of how important the meeting is, knock and please pull me out, send me a note. Well, this is the response to be given. Or I would simply say, could you stand in for me for this meeting? And here is all the material. One, it gave me an extended family at work. But on the other hand, I think it allowed me to build capable leaders around me, because in some ways, there was a lot of knowledge transfer. I call it knowledge transfer today, but those days it was about seeking help. And in some ways, really created a very collegial, positive workplace environment. The second thing is about being yourself. I've often seen that women tend to probably role model themselves around successful men leaders or men colleagues. And if you do that, somewhere as a woman, you're not in your own skin. And the day you're not yourself, somewhere you do not or cannot give your best, because there's something out there playing on your mind always. Also, I've seen people think being traditionally dressed like the sari I'm in today is perhaps not seen as a sign of being progressive. But for me, that was the done thing. I feel very comfortable when I'm traditionally dressed, when I am myself. And I see absolutely no harm in sharing that, listen, I'm struggling with something and seeking advice, whether it is a work problem, a business issue, or an opportunity which somebody else may have a better idea about. And to my mind, a combination of an extended family at work, being yourself, really is strategy that can go a long way in creating for yourself a positive uplift, if I will say, or the wind beneath your wings if you want to fly.
Great, thank you. So now I want to talk about leadership styles. You have a reputation for being a very strong people person. How would you or your peers describe your leadership style? And what qualities or competences do you have you found to be important during your career?
I would say that beyond being a people's person, and I'm glad you've at least heard of that, I think most people would say I follow a flexible leadership style. Most parts, I'm a listener. I'm somebody who takes my role as a leader as being one of a mentor rather than being very prescriptive about how one should be. But that does not mean that when it's a tough decision that needs to be made, or clear directions or directives to be given, that I would shy away. And I think in today's fast-changing world, it's very important to be flexible, because if you're not, you actually can miss out an opportunity. Also, the dynamics are changing, where if you have a mindset and you get caught onto one thing and are unwilling to change your stance or position, you might find that you've just got locked into not a very good position. And I think that flexible work style has allowed me, therefore, to be able to adapt myself, help the organization adopt and adapt a course that is more forward-looking, more futuristic, and really create a set of capable leaders which are alive to the future, rather than either living on their past accolades. And another thing is, when things are changing fast, and if you think about what the world of technology has done, I mean, today we're doing an interview, but it's a virtual one, right? You think about it in the context of the markets we serve. Earlier, you would need to travel down, and you got limited by the time available, the distance you could travel, or your place of functioning. With today's changing world, that's no longer a constraint. Now, if technology has allowed that, but if your own policies and thought process is not adaptive and flexible, then somewhere success will fall short of the real opportunity.
Okay, thank you. So an ongoing challenge, not just in India, but globally, is what can we do to increase the representation of senior women in leadership? So in India, women make up 42% of new grads, but only 24% of entry-level professionals. Of these, about 19% reach senior level management roles, and women currently hold only 7.7% of board seats and just 2.7% of board chairs. So I would like to end this interview by asking you to share with our virtual audience some words of advice from both a corporate and individual perspective. So firstly, the corporate perspective. What do you think companies and leaders can do to increase the number of women in leadership roles in India?
Thank you. That's a big problem corporate India is facing, and I can say not just me, but almost every CEO is thinking about what can we do to kind of arrest the mid-career fallouts of the women we hire. It's a pity first that the number of graduate women are not equal to those joining the workforce. So clearly a lot more needs to be done in terms of just widening that funnel. And to me, that's a lot about social change and supportive work environments. One of the reasons why financial services in particular is able to attract more women talent or services in general versus manufacturing is just location. In a country like India, a manufacturing plant would be located quite far away, where traveling and just the supportive infrastructure would not be there. So that itself rules out a lot of jobs, and that needs to change. And it's important that companies, leadership in particular, and boards are mindful of that and make their workspaces more inclusive. Even shop floors have work to do, because I recall an incident where I had visited a client's plant and I needed to use the ladies' room, and there wasn't one, which meant that you had to wait to go back to the hotel. So that itself speaks volumes of how infrastructure itself needs to be fixed. The second thing is that, mid-career, which is, let's say you've worked for about 7 to 10 years, is the time when women would get married and have children. And if policies are not supportive on maternity, on staying engaged so that you encourage women to come back after their maternity leave, and also provide some form of flexible work hours after you join back work with a young child, it would be very hard for women to continue. And I think a lot more needs to be done. Today, we have a situation in India where law provides for longer maternity leave. So you can take up to nearly 6 months, and that will go a long way. It was just introduced a year ago, so you'll begin to see some benefit of that rollout. And that would mean a lot more companies would begin to offer longer maternity leave. But that's not good enough. I think you need flexible work hours at least for a year after. And that will again encourage a lot more women to come back and then stay, because that's the tough period. Not only that, I think it's about mindsets. A lot of men in particular feel that if they've hired a woman and she's going to take time off, it's going to impact their productivity and often their results. And for that, it's important that performance evaluations take out such kind of necessities. And I have this joke, which I often tell people: it's only women that have the privilege of delivering babies. And it's a privilege. So why should it be treated as something that needs an exception, right? It's biological, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. So I would think that flexible working hours, particularly after maternity, is important. Having supportive policies in making women feel inclusive at the workplace, and investing in, I would say, allowing women to speak up and participate better is also important, because traditionally women do tend to be a little quieter, and often that's misunderstood for not knowing enough. Leadership acceleration programs, and that's something we have at CRISIL. Creating cohorts, we have an inspiration program that focuses on women leadership and helps give women an opportunity to learn, to benefit from hearing each other's experience, and also being provided with professional training to grow can go a long way. And I think that's something that CEOs, management boards need to really focus on. There's another very important point, which is around equal opportunity. You know, it's always tough for companies to say that please hire women so that you have more talent coming in at a senior level. But I'd say it's important for the guidance to be choose the best person for the job. Just don't decide that a woman may not spend that many hours at work or may not be as effective. And that, I think, has to do with hiring policies. And today with technology, it's important to embrace policies beyond flexi timing around opportunity to work from home. And I think it's down to the kind of role. Obviously, it's not the norm, because otherwise you're completely out of touch with the customer and your colleagues, and that doesn't work well for the company or the person. But this can go a long way in helping women continue in their roles, because if you do that, you begin to have senior leaders, and then you get them board ready. Because if you don't work through the pipeline, you're not going to have women in boards. And the last thing, India about 2 years ago introduced a policy to have at least one woman director. And I think it was a great step, because not only does it sort of have a framework to have women take those positions, what it will do is be the catalyst for more women to come, because women will learn from the experience of women board members. I myself have served on boards now for almost 7-8 years. It's huge learning, and you have a lot to tell your colleagues and offer inputs to young women who are aspiring to take up board seats as well. And the last thing would be is, end of the day for CEOs, I'd say that if you want to see a change, you have to be the change yourself. It's not enough to speak. It's really important to do what you say or what you give as advice. And I think all of this is not rocket science, but if implemented, can go a long way to make the difference.
Well, Ashu, we have run out of time. I mean, we could have gone on and on. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And we thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. You are a true role model for both men and women. And we wish you all the very best in the future.
Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.